Hello everyone. This is Yuti Doshi from Man Mantra Mental Health. That's Saskia and that's Zara. They are from London and they run the page Helping Families UK. So I would like to know more about you guys. Please introduce yourselves. Saskia can go first.
So I'm Saskia and I am an art and play therapist from London. I trained in the last kind of 4 or 5 years and I've only recently opened up a private practice. I also work as a therapist in schools. So I have a little bit of work where I see children only in a school context, and then I also have a small private practice with a therapy room with all the possible equipment and play and art things you could possibly imagine. I think I'm a bit of a maximalist, so I don't have a kind of, my room is quite full. It isn't just, one pot. It's very, I put everything out there and then I see what the children want to use to make their art. And in the last few months, I set up Helping Families with Zara.
Lovely. Zara?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm also a psychotherapist in London. I started off working with adults, and I've worked with adults with various pathologies and issues. And then I moved into working with children, similar to Saskia. I use all the materials possible, so art therapy, play therapy, role play. And I work privately using sand tray therapy predominantly with children, and in a secondary school doing kind of a multitude of different therapies with adolescents.
Wow, this sounds so wonderful. I really want to know more about your work. And first thing is, why mental health and why arts with therapy?
Yeah, so I got into working in mental health when I was working as a teacher. And I was working in a school it was kind of a bit like an inner city school where lots of the children came from poverty-stricken homes. Lots of the children were experiencing domestic violence. Lots of children were going to food banks. And there were so many issues in the classroom that I felt like all I was doing was kind of calming children down and trying to find for each child that needed something extra, 30 that I was working with. And when I got the opportunity to start training, I thought that was probably the most direct way that I could help the kids in my class to get the kind of love, calm, respect that they needed, but also to use this ability to tap into creativity to help children reach their feelings and find ways to express themselves that they wouldn't usually be able to find.
I'm sure you got your calling while you were teaching.
It was one of those things where I felt like I was doing my job. I could teach the children to read. I could teach the children to, do their adding up and taking away. But I felt that there were these big moments where things were missing for them because they couldn't connect to each other because they were very unhappy. They were kind of low energy. They were very tired. They weren't able to play nicely because they hadn't been taught how to do that, and they hadn't been taught how to explain what they needed. So I felt that I spent a lot of my time doing that. And then in retraining, I could use my time more valuably because that was all I had to do. I only had to teach children how to feel what they needed to feel, say what they needed to say, and be themselves. And that was very liberating in terms of not having to do everything else at the same time. So that was it was a good way for me to get to what I was trying to do, for sure.
Sarah?
I came into it from largely a personal experience. So I had a very, very positive experience of psychotherapy myself, which led me to go on to working with adults. And then when I was working with adults, I started to more and more realize that what I was doing with the adults was filling in a deficiency in their childhood. So if they'd had an absent mother, they might kind of internalize me as a mothering figure, and just by being there every week for them, it would repair some of that damage that had been done in childhood. So I started to think, well, there is sometimes a limitation with how much progress an adult can make. So actually, if we could do this with children, then that would make a much bigger difference. And then if we could do this with families, that would make an even bigger difference, because a child is what we call the identified client. They're the ones that are displaying the problems, but actually the issue is almost always a systemic one within the family system and the school system. So yeah, I realized that my favorite thing about working with adults was actually the developmental theory that got them to where they were. So it made sense to me to think, well, actually I should put some of my time into working with children, and then these adults won't all need therapy.
So, how do you guys use art with children, and how art helps? That also is something that I really want to know.
Yeah, so I think that art definitely does something very special, which is it gives children words, a way of using their words that they wouldn't, where they don't have to actually verbalize, and they don't have to think and brave themselves and ready themselves to say something to you that's scary or unknown. They can use this idea of creation to make something that feels slightly separate from them, but is still totally part of them. And as Freud said, the royal road to the unconscious, the way of tapping into your unconscious self and sharing that in a way that is much less scary and also much less thought through. You know, if I had to tell all the things about myself that I don't want to tell other people, that would be quite hard. But if I could draw a picture or I could make something, we could find a way to talk about it that was less personal and yet get to the same place. And I think also when we talk about play therapy, the big thing I think that play does is two things. One, it helps foster a connection between the people playing. So if it's parents playing with children with you, you're basically trying to help them connect to each other physically, emotionally, through humor, and you're trying to find different ways to make connections that are different from what they have at home. And I think also we know that play triggers positive chemicals in the brain, which if you are teaching a child on a weekly basis or a family on a weekly basis to make positive chemicals together, they start doing that at home as well as in the therapy rooms. And I think that's why I think art and play therapy makes such a big impact on people, because they have this ability to express, but also ability to hone the way that their brain makes chemicals to make them feel good more of the time.
So, I would like to know from you any of your experiences, how art must have changed a child's or a parent-child relationship in your, like, something from your example, from your practice.
Yeah, so I think just to kind of expand a bit on what Saskia was saying, I think one of the brilliant things about art therapy is if you say to someone, tell me your life, it's difficult. But if you say, draw it, then if I were to try and explain to you a Picasso painting you'd never seen, it would be really, really difficult. But if I showed it to you, then I could talk you through it. So, you know, children sometimes create something that's really, really abstract, but because it's then in front of them, they can explain to you what they've created. And sometimes it could be as simple as asking children to draw their families. And you see that actually mum is really big and dad's really small, and then you can just point that out and say, you know, like, dad's not very big, is he? And that might prompt the child to say, well, you know, dad's not here very much, and those kind of things. It's a really good image for them to be able to expand on using words. I think in terms of connecting parents and children, there's something called theraplay, which they use a lot with adopted families as a way of connecting. And one of the most simple examples is what's called a Winnicott doodle. So you probably know Winnicott was one of, you know, the founders of child psychotherapy. And it's really simple. You take a pen and you just freely draw whatever squiggles you want. And from that, you ask the child if they can see any pictures in this squiggle. And they might see, actually, oh, look, there's a fish, or there's the shape of a face. And what you're doing in that process, or what a mum and a child or a dad and a child are doing, is they're engaging through play, and they're connecting and finding a kind of a common ground and a language that both of them can speak.
Saskia, any examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of the examples I have are based on children trying to verbalize things that they find very difficult. One child that I work with a little girl, she used to draw pictures of an animal, and the animal was having things thrown at it, big rocks that were thrown at the animal. And when we talked about it over time, because each week there was another animal that was having these rocks pelted at it from all angles, even though this child had quite a simple family life, nothing massively worrying, she wasn't in an abusive home, she felt like people were constantly asking her to do things that she didn't know how to do. It was a stressful experience of being asked to do things that felt much too heavy. So she was this animal, and sometimes it's much less literal. Sometimes it's, as Sarah said, you know, it's completely abstract, squiggly business on the page, but it does represent something that they find much more easy to express in a way that is less hurtful and nerve-wracking, because it's it's something that they can create separate to themselves. And Zara and I were talking yesterday about this idea that when you make something yourself, but you put it over here to look at it with another person, it's less personal, it's less intimate, because you can both look in a separate place. You can meet each other in a separate place to talk about something that's very, very hard. If I'm looking deeply into your eyes and I'm saying, tell me all about it, you know, it's much too much. It's scary for an adult. It's definitely scary for a child. But if we can externalize an issue, put it in a place, and both have time to look at it separately, whilst doing that, you know, next to each other, kind of a bit like parallel play, you get this opportunity to deconstruct and go deeper in a way that's much less nerve-wracking and much less personal as you're looking at it. But the feelings discovered and the feelings that are you know, changed from having that shared intimate experience in a separate place can be just as powerful as having one where you're so deeply engaged one-on-one.
So I think therapists who use arts as therapy and play as therapy are the ones who are really refined, and they have to do their homework and very intuitive as well to understand what is the underlying meaning or underlying behavior. That's what you guys are also doing, and I really appreciate what you do at work. And I really want to know, what tips would you want to give our viewers when it comes to using art or play? And since because of the pandemic situation here in India, especially in my city, Mumbai, our lockdown has been extended even for 1 more month, and people are going to be home. And honestly, initially the first 2 months it was like, oh, family time, and we are enjoying. But as the time increases, everything, you know, it's coming out, and obviously there are going to be conflicts, right? So, a few tips you would like to give to our viewers, or any particular games or anything that, you know, something simple that they can do at home.
Yeah, I think there's so much material that you can use at home. And actually, one tip I would give for when you do start to come out of the lockdown is things to do with hiding and reappearing. So when children are very, very small, they don't know that when something's out of sight, it still exists. And it's a big developmental stage when a baby has what we call object permanence, where they realize, oh, mum's left the room, but she still exists. So it means that I can stay asleep in my room because I know that she's there. So one thing that I would recommend when you're starting to come out of the lockdown is anything like hide and seek, or if you take something like torn up newspaper and put it in a big box and take your children's toys and hide them inside, and they can find them again. And it's just reinstilling that theory that when things go away, they still exist. So when you do start to come out of lockdown, after being with your family all day, all night, it might be quite anxiety provoking. So for them to have that constant play where things disappear and reappear is a really, really useful thing. One of my other favorites is to fill plastic water bottles with things as a way of explaining our emotions. So something I've done with children and adolescents is you take a water bottle and fill it with anything you've got. You know, it could be rice and food colouring, and then add some water as well, or glitter if you have it. And you shake it all up, and you just explain to the child that the glitter is like your feelings, and when everything's really high in the air, you can't see what colour's what and which piece of glitter is which shape. It's all messy. But as we slowly start to take deep breaths and we watch it, everything starts to settle and everything starts to become a bit more clear. And then we can see what's in front of us and we can start to manage it. And it's just a really nice way of helping children with big kind of angry outbursts.
I would just like to add here, just by listening to this bottle activity, I mean, I can understand it even like so clearly about what you're saying. Imagine a child actually doing it. You don't have to even explain so much when children do it themselves. Right? So I think,
yeah, children are.
Yes, Zara?
Go, Saskia. So children are very, very intuitive with these things, and I always kind of joke that children are much better at therapy than adults, because they let themselves go there because they're just doing it through play. And as adults, we only ever play with a goal in sight. You know, we need to win the game or finish the game, whereas children are quite happy to just play until they want to move on. So yeah, it's very intuitive for children.
Yes.
And I wanted to say that I think one of the big things I would say to your audience, particularly parents, is that we've got to give ourselves a break. We're in a very, very different situation than we've ever been in before. It's stressful for parents because we are the people in charge. We are the responsible person for these children in a time with absolutely no history to back it up, with rules that change every minute, with facts and figures that change all the time. And none of us are going to be doing our best parenting. Nobody will be able to be doing their 100% best job. The absolute key is to note that and say, I didn't do my best job yesterday because I was really stressed out and I was shouting, or I was lazy in the way that I did my parenting because I was really stressed out. But tomorrow I'm going to have a better day, where I take my children more seriously and I give them enough time to talk to me, and I think of something fun to do in the afternoon, and I try and punctuate the day in a different way. I try and think of different activities, or let's have a breakfast where all the food is red, or let's have a slumber party in the evening where we all sleep together on the floor in the living room. Just up. You know, no one's going to do it perfectly every day. This is a very difficult time for everybody, and that's one of the main reasons we started helping families, because nobody had any rules for this. Nobody. You know, we'd never seen anything like this. Children not going to school before, lockdown, information from the government that some people would feel that they couldn't trust, not being able to trust the person next door to you wasn't going to give you something scary. You know, all of this stuff is very, very different from everything we've been taught. And as adults, it's completely taken away our freedom and our human rights, and all the things that we waited till we were adults to get, the ability to choose what we do every day, has been taken away from everyone. So nobody is functioning at their best level. So I think do all these lovely things, think of these great ideas, but also if you're having a day where you don't do that and you didn't have the energy to, you know, play hide and seek, or you didn't, whatever, try again the next day and give yourself a break, and note that you're trying your best to be a good parent in a very difficult time. But also note that if you're having lots and lots of days back to back where it's not good and you're very shouty and your children are bored, and it's, maybe ask someone to help you and think, I'm not 100% doing my best that I can. I want to be the best parent I can be, and I'm going to give myself a break, but only to an extent. I don't want my children to end up in a situation where they've had a horrible time when they don't need to. So I think it's both things. And that's, you can find information about that from us on our website, which is information for getting your children back to school at the end of this and how to do it safely, as well as information on how to teach your children about endings, because at the moment there are lots of things that are starting and finishing with no indication. We've had the end of the school year, nobody knew who went at school. We've had the people's birthdays, we've had, you know, happened and started and finished that we didn't even know had happened and finished, because this weird lockdown period has had no particular markers for days or nights. And so that was one of the other things that we wanted to address with the work that we did together.
So I guess this sums it up a lot. We know how, like through this session, we know how children can benefit from art-based therapy, and even parents. And one very important tip that parents need to really understand right now is it's okay to not do your best, and you can take a break. It's completely all right. And with children, sometimes, especially during this time, they might not be able to express themselves through talking. Maybe using art and play is the best thing to do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a parent, you don't have to worry if you can't interpret your children's art, because children process through play. So it doesn't matter if you don't have a degree in working with children. It's about your children having that outlet. And, you know, to go back to Winnicott, all we need to do is be good enough. And that looks different every day.
Yeah, true. And I think each and every parent is good enough. It's just that they need to believe in themselves that they can do it.
Yeah, and they need to ask for help in the areas that they don't do well with. You know, if you're a parent that's very bad at time management, and your children are always late for school and they always get in trouble, ask a friend, you know, ask your friend. your kids always get to school on time. Any chance you could help me to organize myself better? Don't be embarrassed. No one's going to be great at everything. You know, if you're the parent that hates getting messy, find a friend who really loves getting messy, who doesn't mind if their kids get messy, or put your children in the bath to do their painting. Then when they do the painting and it's finished, they can be washed straight afterwards. You know, I think no one's going to be excellent at all of it, but we can all try and either ask for help or learn to be better at painting and give our children enough space to do the things they need to do developmentally, but also emotionally. And particularly at the moment when everyone's stuck inside, there'll be lots of things you're thinking, oh, I wish I could do that, but we can't. Try and think of a way that you can do it where maybe it's not with paint, but it's with crayons. So if it gets on the floor, it will be easy to wipe off. You know, there are things that you can do at home that don't depend on going outside, or there are things that you can ask for help with at a different time. You know, if your friends have got really good resources and they live on the road, one of you could drop it over to the other person when you go to shop without touching anybody, spray everything down and have a go with what they've got. You know, no one's going to have everything at their house, but maybe you can share if you can do it safely.
Right. So I think there's this judgment that we need to get rid of, judging ourselves and expecting and judging our children. There's so many things involved in this, and I think once we open ourselves to this, and once we understand and accept as parents that it's okay to not be perfect, is when things start happening for the better. Yes, so thank you so much, both of you. I'm really, really happy to have you both here. For our viewers, Helping Families UK is their Instagram page. I'll be definitely adding that in our bio. And if you have any questions related to your children or your parents or anything regarding families, you can always send a message to them or me. I'll help you connecting with them, and we can ask them for tips and question answers and whatever you need. So thank you so much for watching this, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.